Paul Glumaz, veteran political activist with the movement of Lyndon LaRouche. And today is the 11th of March. And this is being brought to you by General Welfare Presents. By the time you are able to watch this, a lot of things will have occurred. On this day, it will be history, but President Donald Trump at 6 o'clock Pacific time will be making an emergency announcement to the nation. You will have long after this have heard that announcement. Now, everything is coming to a point of crisis. It's like all the variables are coming together. The war situation, the financial crisis, and they're all kind of interacting. The oil crisis, the oil financial crisis. And we've come to a point where the existence of the nation itself is at stake. Every nation. And the forces in the world that are out to destroy all nations, this is their time. And the forces in the world of which I am a part of, which are out to destroy those who are trying to destroy the nations and revive the nations, this is also our time. Okay, now let me give you a sense of this. Through the last period, globalization, just in time, exploiting cheap labor, deindustrializing the advanced sector, creating this global interdependence, creating a situation where no nation has any economic independence, creating a situation where more and more and more nations are under the control of a global financial system that is based in the offshore jurisdictions where all the tax havens are. In the last 20 years, there's been an all-out assault on the nations in the Middle East to create chaos. So there's no government there. There's no functioning government, whether it's in Iraq, or Libya, or Syria, or Morocco, or Tunisia, or Egypt, or any of these countries. They're all slated for chaos. That's been the U.S. military doctrine since about 2001, during the administration of George Bush Jr. And the idea is that there are only those parts of the world which will be allowed to be relatively developed, and the rest of the world would be, in chaos. And the raw materials would be at the control of private armies and private operations. Oil itself would be similarly. And right now, that crisis in the Middle East is coming to a head as efforts are now underway to dismantle Saudi Arabia and Turkey as the next phase of the destruction of that region. So that's one thing. However, China has figured it out, and China, in essence, has adopted the orientation originally proposed by Lyndon LaRouche, which led to the Belt and Road, and which led to China's internal development and external expansion of that internal development to be shared with the rest of the world. And that situation has gone forward rather quickly. So you have China surviving a massive corruption operation that was being launched by the West internally in China. Most of these red billionaires have been crushed. And you have China, which is committed to a full industrial development perspective, and for the world, a full industrial development perspective. And you have Russia working with China. And you have essentially a lot of the Asian countries are now moving to work with China, as are the African countries. But mainly, this is potential. And then you have a president of the United States who disagrees with the neo-Malthusian population reduction, chaos policy of endless wars. But he is not in the strongest position because he has no one to work with. The entire Democratic Party has become a weaponized assault on the presidency. And the Republicans, a good chunk of the Republicans are still embedded with those policies. So he's in a very difficult circumstance. And the policy of war is still underway. It's still being promoted by the military and the Defense Department and the State Department. So in this context, you have an increasing ticking time bomb of the financial system for the last 12 years, since 2008. And in this context, you have the coronavirus, which has, the panic around the coronavirus has impacted travel, has impacted people coming together to meet, has impacted innumerable areas of employment. Here in Seattle, already we have the school district shut down, University of Washington shut down. And all of these things have a ricochet effect in terms of a declining financial stream, which is intersecting the weakness of the global banking system. And so we are now at the point where the whole thing is going to go, is going to collapse. The stock market has gone down, close to 5,000 points, or 1/6 of its value. Not that that matters. I mean, the Dow Jones. Not that that matters per se, but it's an indication of a general panic that's now starting to spread among the people who have money in the stock market and their 401ks and so forth and so on. So that's the situation. So we're coming to the point where all of these things are hitting. The war situation, the stock market, the financial situation, and the effect of the coronavirus on people's behavior. And what the Chinese did is they went on an all-out mobilization, a people's war, and it appears that at this point they have gotten it under control. But it was a massive undertaking. They had to essentially shut down their economy for a period of time. Now they can start to come back with their economy. But they were willing to take the hit. But of course, the rest of the world, in part, or a good chunk of the rest of the world, depend on the Chinese availability of Chinese manufacturing. So that's a very interesting thing. And then in the middle of all this, you have a collapse of oil consumption, and you have this a war breaking out within the OPEC countries over the pricing of oil. Russia's refusing to reduce its production. So now you have a price war, and if the price of oil goes down below a certain point, it will bankrupt the entire shale oil industry in the United States, and all the debt that's involved with that will be detonated, and on we go. So it is the case that we are now entering that crisis, and there's only one way to deal with that crisis, and that's through emergency government action to protect the people and to reorganize the financial system and to establish a new financial architecture, a new financial system among nations. And so that's one vector. And the other vector is to prevent that from happening, to destroy all possibilities that that's possible. so that the chaos will descend upon the planet, and we will enter a population reduction and so forth on a massive scale. And that population reduction could very well be on its way. You have the locust problem in Africa, which actually came from the Middle East, from Iran, northern Iran, Pakistan. It's now in Africa. This locust problem is huge, and nothing's being done about it. You have the oil crisis, and you have a situation where chaos is quite possible on a global scale. However, it is precisely in those kind of moments that the government, the state, the institutions of the state, through their government, can act to mobilize the people to defend the nation. In this case, in mobilizing to defend against the coronavirus, you are essentially creating the institutions to mobilize also for the financial collapse. And this opens the door for LaRouche's 4 laws, which is the key to the whole situation. The 4 laws of Lyndon LaRouche are the key, starting with Glass-Steagall, protecting the commercial banking sector and preventing its use in global financial speculation. And then the ability to set up a credit to fund the infrastructure, massive infrastructure projects. And then the setting up of a fixed exchange system with other nations, where you have the dollar and all these other currencies fixed to each other with a gold reference point, so that they can alter their relationship to gold if there's a change in the relationship, if they want to change in the relationship of the currencies, but you always maintain a fixed currency. This is the way out. This is how nations can survive. They're not going to be able to survive otherwise. That's the point we're in. We're in an existential crisis where nations cannot survive if they do not make some fundamental changes. And Helga Zepp-LaRouche is calling upon a summit of principally the 4 major powers, potentially other nations as well, Russia, China, US, and India, to begin putting this all together. Because this is the existential crisis that we're going into. And there's no way out of that existential crisis except through the powers of the nation state. There's no other way out. It does not exist. And there are those who would rather it did not exist. The British media and the British authorities are all saying, wow, this whole corona thing is kind of overblown, you know, just let people die. I mean, some will live, some will die, but you don't need to go into all of these preparations and what have you. That's their view. They don't really care about human beings. They only care about looting the human beings. And they don't care about human life. So that's the situation. So here in Seattle, there's a huge crisis emerging around the coronavirus. And the question you have to ask you is we don't know how the federal government is going to move on this. And we don't know how the states and the cities and the counties, well, we see what they're starting to do. They're starting to shut down, like a lot of the freeways are free now. You can actually drive from Seattle to Everett or in rush hour and actually get there without too much of a traffic. I mean, without a complete traffic jam. You know, you can probably go from Everett to Seattle, from Marysville to Seattle in the morning, and there's not that much traffic relative to where it was before. So you can see already that the effects that this is having on the economy in the Northwest. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, will this crisis just be continuing? It'll get worse and worse and worse and worse. And there'll be temporary measures being done to deal with this, but we just have to get used to it. We'll have to get used to staying in our homes. We have to get used to all of this stuff. Where's it going to go? Where's the light at the end of the tunnel? Will the coronavirus disappear for a while and come back in September next year? How are we going to deal with all of this? And that's really a key aspect of the situation. So the only way we're going to successfully deal with it is to look at China. It appears that China has successfully dealt with the coronavirus, but it took a profound economic toll. But that toll was sustainable because the the people were willing to work with the government. They were willing to be part of the mobilization. The question is, when Trump calls for such a mobilization, will the people of the United States be willing to follow and work with the President of the United States? This is where the problem lies. This is a very severe problem. Will Trump actually mobilize through the presidential powers to actually implement the equivalent of Glass-Steagall? Because there are ways in which he can go around using the emergency powers in a crisis to go around the current financial system and put in a similar structure like Glass-Steagall without necessarily going to Congress. There's ways to do that. In a crisis, a president can do just about anything. But to do those things, he has to have the support of the population. He has to have that. And without that, he's not going to make it. We can't make it as a nation. And so you look at and we're in the middle of a presidential race in which the entire Democratic Party has been weaponized for impeachment, for destroying Trump, for destroying anything that Trump might do, whether it's good or bad relative to the population. So then you have the front runner that came out of the elections the last Super Tuesday and this last Tuesday. Who is the front runner? It's Joseph Biden. Who is he? He's clearly showing signs of dementia. It's very hard to fathom how it is that the leading candidate for the Democratic Party is showing signs of dementia and is still campaigning and is being cheered and supported and all of that. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, what is going on? How is this possible? How can we be living in a world in which we have a global breakdown crisis and the leading party with the majority of members in Congress is going all out behind a person clearly showing dementia, showing signs of the kind of dementia you get when you get older, and is not able to be coherent. What world are we living in? You know, you had all these candidates drop out and to back Joe Biden. Why? Where are their where's their willpower? Where's their drive? Well, they were puppets to begin with. And then you got the Bernie Sanders phenomenon, which is not saying it in any way either. But you have to ask yourself, how have we gotten to this point when we're in the middle of a crisis and you have this vacuous clown show in the Democratic Party? How did we get there? Well, we got there because we didn't have a society which was willing to address reality. LaRouche has been talking about the reality of what was coming for 50 years. And we're here. And these people are not addressing reality. They're not looking at reality. They will only address it from the standpoint that Trump failed, that Trump made a mistake, that Trump isn't doing what has to be done. That's the only way they're going to. Trump is the cause of the coronavirus. Trump is the cause of the economic collapse. That's the only way they're going to address it. And you have to ask yourself, who's running these people? Where are they coming from? And I keep coming back to the role of the British. The British establishment, the global financial center of the City of London, the policy of population reduction, which they're clearly supporting. They're clearly supporting shutting down the industrial base on which human existence depends. as if it were the most important dire necessity to do this, allegedly for the climate emergency. There's no climate emergency. There is an emergency, but it's not a climate emergency. It's a financial, economic disintegration emergency. It's an emergency about an impending war, world war. It's an emergency about a biological holocaust. Those are the kinds of emergencies that we have to deal with. Not that the coronavirus is going to wipe out everybody, but you have to ask yourself, where did this thing come from? Was it actually, you know, I don't have any proof, but was this thing created? Was the African swine flu created? Was the bird flu that's now destroying most of the bird the poultry population of China? Is that created? You have to ask yourself. These are the kind of questions that you start to question. Now, is this thing designed to cause this kind of chaos in countries such that they wouldn't be able to respond? And therefore we would have a disintegration, and then that disintegration would be further disintegrate the political system within those countries, and those countries would then disintegrate. You see that in Germany, you see that in Italy right now. The way they handled the corona situation there was totally incompetent in Italy, and you can expect the same in Germany. You know, and we're hoping that Donald Trump handles this in a competent way. So that's where we are. So as we go into this crisis, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do many more of these situations, and I don't know where we're going. But everyone who's out there, everyone listening to this, everyone who's not listening to this, but has to recognize that the existing system that we're in is finished, and something new has to come out of it, or else it's questionable whether there will be a survival of the human species. And in a sense, that's where we are. We're in that kind of moment. So I wish you all the best. It's a very daunting situation. I don't know where I'm going to be. I don't know where you're going to be. I don't know where anybody's going to be by the time you get to watch this, if you get to watch this. So I wish you all the best. Okay.
Okay, Paul. All right, we are gathered here across the street from the Federal Bureau of Investigation headquarters. We didn't want to get too close because they're kind of touchy. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is not really federal, it's not really a bureau, and it doesn't really investigate. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is a criminal entity acting on behalf of the Saudi British interest, acting on behalf of a global financial criminal structure. It is the enforcement arm. It is the spying arm. It is the blackmailing arm. It is the frame-up arm. It is the protector of terrorism in the United States.
Common stock investments have helped to make our country prosperous and powerful. Owning a share in American industry is like owning a share in the future of our nation. But remember, John Q, there is a risk as well as an advantage in owning any kind of property. So get the facts before you put your money to work.
Amen.